Potatoes are one of the most consumed vegetables on the planet, with the average person eating a whopping 20,000 of these things across an 80-year lifetime. And while on the surface it might look like a dull-colored ball, don't be fooled by its appearance. This is not just a vegetable. It is a biological marvel that underpinned the expansion of human civilization for millennia. Today, it is grown in over 160 countries, making it a cornerstone of global food security. If you could peel back the layers of time, you'd realize that what you are looking at was once a botanical rebel that carried enough poison in its veins to kill a human with one bite. It was a plant that rewrote its own genetic code to survive some of the planet's harshest environments, branded as a tool of the devil, before ultimately becoming a fuel that would give birth to empires. Renowned philosopher Friedrich Engels even remarked that the potato was the equal of iron for its contribution to civilization. The origins of the potato begins nearly 9 million years ago on the South American continent. The Andes were thrusting upward due to tectonic shifts, creating isolated, high-altitude pockets of land. In the foothills of these rising mountains, a biological event occurred that sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. A group of plants related to the modern tomato crossed paths with a lineage called the Tuberosum. This wasn't just a simple crossbreeding. It was a profound genetic convergence. These two lineages fused to create what scientists call a mosaic genome. To become the potato we recognize today, the plant needed two specific traits. One of them, a gene called SP6A, came from the tomato side. It's essentially a physiological light switch that tells the plant when to stop putting energy into leaves and start dumping it into underground storage. The second, the IT1 gene, came from the Tuberosum side, and it controlled the architecture of the stolons, those underground stems that reach out into the dark soil. Without both of these working in perfect harmony, the potato would just be another leafy weed. Instead, the potato became a survivor, capable of cloning itself in the harsh, unpredictable highlands, where seeds might fail, but a buried tuber could wait out the storm. But even after it mastered the art of the tuber, the potato was far from friendly. If you were to walk through the wild Andean slopes today and find one of the 150 species of wild potatoes, you wouldn't want to eat it. They are tiny, maybe the size of a pea or a hen's egg, and they are packed with something called glycoalkaloids. These are a chemical defense system, bitter, toxic, and potentially fatal. For millions of years, the potato was essentially a weed that fought back against anything that tried to eat it. It took the intervention of human beings, specifically the indigenous people around the Lake Titicaca Basin, nearly 10,000 years ago, to see the potential in this toxic weed as a food. And to transform this poisonous tuber into an edible source of nutrients took one of the most sophisticated food processing techniques ever devised, an exercise called the production of chuño. High up in the Altiplano, above 12,000 feet, the environment does something unique. It provides a diurnal freeze-thaw cycle. The nights are bone-chillingly cold, and the days are hit with intense solar radiation. The Andean people realized they could use the mountain itself as a factory. They would spread the potatoes out to freeze at night, which shattered the cellular structure of the tubers. Then, as the sun rose, they would literally trample the frozen potatoes with their bare feet. This didn't just smash them, it squeezed out the water and, crucially, the dissolved toxic bitterness. The result was a lightweight, indestructible yet high-calorie vegetable that could be stored for years in warehouses, allowing Inca legions to march without lengthy supply trains. Yet for the most part, the potato remained a regional secret for hundreds of years. When the Spanish conquistadors first stumbled upon it in 1537 in Colombian villages, they didn't see a global staple. They saw what they described as a type of truffle. And when the first tubers eventually arrived in Spain around 1570, the potato entered what some call its ornamental phase. You see, Europe didn't want the potato. Because it wasn't mentioned in the Bible and it grew underground, it was viewed with superstitious suspicion, associated with leprosy and witchcraft. For over 100 years, this world-changing crop remained nothing more than a botanical curiosity grown in the gardens of the elite for its pretty purple and white flowers. But there was a biological barrier that the history books usually gloss over, and it's arguably the most important mutation in the history of human nutrition. The original Andean potatoes were short-day plants. They were calibrated to the equatorial sun, where days and nights are roughly equal. When they were brought to the high latitudes of Europe, the plants got confused. They encountered the long days of the European summer, and their internal clocks broke. They would grow massive amounts of green foliage, but they wouldn't produce a single tuber until the days shortened in late autumn, usually just in time for the first frost to kill the entire crop. The potato was essentially a prisoner of its own biology, until a random, beautiful mutation occurred in a gene called STCDF1. This was a genetic bypass that allowed the potato to ignore the length of the day. It was like the plant suddenly learned to tell time in a new language. Genomic analysis of old herbarium samples, including some collected by Charles Darwin himself, shows exactly when this shift happened. Once the potato could tuberize during the long summer days, it became white gold. By the mid-18th century, it had transformed from a suspicious devil's plant into the fuel for the Industrial Revolution. Economists estimate that this single vegetable was responsible for approximately 25% of all population growth between 1700 and 1900. It provided a solution to the Malthusian trap, the theory that population growth would always outpace food production, and thus keeping societies stuck at subsistence level. But the potato, providing a caloric surplus, allowed for urbanization on a scale previously thought impossible. The reason for this was that, unlike grains, which waste energy building rigid stalks and husks to hold weight against the wind, the potato uses the soil itself for support. This created a harvest index anomaly. While wheat and corn are largely inedible biomass, 70% to 80% of a potato plant's dry matter is edible food. This biological efficiency allows the potato to deliver 15.6 million calories per hectare, nearly triple the caloric output of rice. Not only that, but it provided more calories per acre than almost any other crop, allowing populations to explode and cities to grow. As the potato conquered the world, it became a tool of power. In India, the British East India Company weaponized it, using tax exemptions and contests to force peasants into growing a crop that could cheaply sustain a colonial labor force. In China, it arrived via the Maritime Silk Road, thriving on marginal lands where rice and wheat simply gave up. Today, the vegetable has become so important here that they have become the world's leading producer, treating the potato as a pillar of national security because it produces more calories per drop of water than any other staple. And they are right to hold it in such high regard. The potato is arguably the most nutritionally complete staple available to us. Its primary protein, patatine, has a biological value of 90 to 100, higher than soybeans and comparable to eggs or milk. While just a single medium-sized potato is packed with 30% of our daily recommended vitamin C intake. But this vegetable's global domination story has a darker side, a deep flaw that we are still trying to escape today. Because nearly all the potatoes in Europe and North America were descended from just a few original Andean introductions, the entire continent was growing what was essentially a single, massive clone. Every plant was genetically identical, meaning every plant shared the same Achilles heel. In 1845, that heel was struck by an invasive microorganism called Phytophthora infestans, better known as late blight. And as history tells us, this would have horrific consequences, the most notorious of which was the Great Irish Famine. The blight would arrive on the wind, and within days, the country's lush green potato fields turned into a black, liquefying mass of rot. Because the Irish lumper variety had zero resistance, and the population had become so dependent on the crop, over 1 million people died, and millions more fled. This single event reduced the population of Ireland by 20%, and became a biological wake-up call that echoed through the centuries. It forced us to realize that by choosing convenience and uniformity over diversity, we had created a fragile system. It was only in the early 20th century that breeders began to look back to the wild ancestors, those bitter, useless weeds, to find the genes that could fight off the blight. This brings us to the modern era, where the potato is protected by some of the most rigorous regulatory frameworks on the planet. If you look at the Scottish seed potato classification scheme, you're looking at a level of biosecurity that rivals a high-stakes medical lab. Scotland is what they call a community-grade region. Because the northern climate is too cold for the aphids that carry viruses, it has become the global sanctuary for high-health seed. They use a flush-out principle, limiting how many generations a potato can be grown in the soil before it has to be replaced by lab-grown microplants. It's a system designed to ensure that the genetic collapses of the 19th century never happen again. But here's the thing that should really grab your attention. The potato is facing a new threat that a lab can't easily solve. We are living in the Anthropocene, an era of shifting rainfall and rising temperatures. The potato is a sensitive creature. If the temperature stays above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, it simply stops making tubers. It panics and shuts down. So, once again, scientists are becoming bioprospectors, heading back into the wild canyons of Peru and the deserts of Chile to find the lost secrets of the potato's ancestors. They are finding wild species, like Solanum chacoense, that can keep photosynthesizing even when the heat is blistering. They are finding desert relatives that have evolved to drink salt water and thrive in parched soil. These aren't just academic curiosities, they are the climate-smart varieties of the future. And now, we are seeing new breeds like the Tacna in China and the Unica in Kenya that are allowing farmers to produce food in conditions that would have killed a potato just 20 years ago. We are using tools like clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, CRISPR, and marker-assisted selection to reach back into the 9-million-year-old mosaic genome and pull out the traits we threw away during domestication because they were too bitter or too small. The potato is a plant that was erased from the menu because it was toxic, then hidden in the Andes for millennia, then blamed for diseases it didn't cause, and finally cloned until it almost collapsed. It is a survivor that has navigated the rise of mountains and the fall of empires. The potato offers us a reminder that true food security comes from having diversity that we are only just beginning to appreciate, given the lessons from our past and the challenges of our future. By rediscovering the potato not as a simple vegetable, but as a biological ally, we are reconnecting with a lineage of survival that goes back to the dawn of the Andes. We are bringing back the white gold that was nearly lost to the blight, and in doing so, we are guaranteeing a harvest for a future that looks increasingly uncertain. If this story helped you see the hidden miracles on your dinner plate in a new light, then please consider joining our little community. We are dedicated to unearthing the untold stories of the wonders hiding in plain sight, from the ancient remedies of the forest to the botanical survivors that feed the world. Our journey into nature's lost pharmacy and forgotten history is really just beginning, and there are so many more secrets waiting to be rediscovered.